400 Years Celebration, Inc. announces its first United Universal Dialogue, a conversation about Africa and African people around the world, Thursday, December 17th through Saturday, December 19th, from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. You may join us via live stream on Facebook and YouTube at 400 Years Celebration or visit our website at www.400yearscelebration.org. Special guests include Bishop Seth Olarte, founder and CEO of 400 Years Celebration, Inc., Bishop Adam J. Richardson, Senior Bishop of the AME Church, Bishop Lawrence Reddick, Senior Bishop of the CME Church, Bishop Kenneth Monroe, presiding prelate of the Eastern North Carolina Episcopal District of the AME Zion Church, and Bishop William Barber of the Repairers of the Breach and the Poor People's Campaign, along with Dr. Jonathan Weaver, Pan African Collective, Dr. Julius Garvey, Ms. Raina Cotterville, Ms. Janine Scott, and many more. Join us for this important conversation Thursday, December 17th through Saturday, December 19th from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Central Standard Time via social media at 400 Years Celebration. For more information, contact Dr. Kathy Thomas McFadden at catmcfadden at yahoo.com. That's KATMCFADDEN at yahoo.com.
Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to the United Universal Dialogue. Good morning, good morning, good morning. We are so delighted that you have joined us this morning for this very important conversation. We know that it's early in Central and Eastern Standard Time and from all around the world. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll be your host and moderator for this entire event. I am the Reverend Dr. Kathy Thomas McFadden. I serve as Executive Director of the 400 Years Celebration Incorporated. And let me share with you what the 400 Years Celebration is all about. It was created and organized to bring together the faith, civic, educational, athletic, economic, political, health communities and families into a unified group to celebrate 400 years of Black life in the United States from 1619 to 2019. And we know that this is 2020, which is almost coming to an end. As a part of its ongoing mission, 400 Years will educate the present generation on the past and prepare the race for surviving successfully for another 400 years to establish a chronological trail to mark significant geographical locations and events of the struggles of African Americans in the United States during those 400 and now 1 years, to raise funds through several entities in order to restore forgotten landmarks in African American communities, for business startups and for sustaining viable businesses, and to address the social needs in the African American community. Today, we've come to have a dialogue about Africa with Africa's and African Americans all around the world of some of the disparities and the issues that plague us. And we know that United we stand, divided we fall, and we knew that coming together would make a difference. A conversation is a start, but we want you to know that it's not the end. This is just the beginning so that we may create platforms and avenues by which we may address the disparities that we experience. And so allow me at this moment the privilege to present to some and introduce to others the CEO, the founder, the visionary of 400 Years Celebration. He is the presiding prelate of the Alabama-Florida Episcopal District in the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church. He is Bishop Seth Olarte. He's a 1976 graduate of the AME Zion Academy in Monrovia, Liberia, and the Liberian Baptist Theological Seminary in 1980 with a BTH degree. He received a BA degree in intermediate education from Livingstone College in Salisbury, North Carolina in 1987. He's a graduate of the School of Divinity at Duke University, where he received a master's degree in religious education. He received his DMin degree in 2003 from Drew University in Madison, New Jersey. Bishop Larte has been the recipient of numerous awards and honors, among them Who's Who in American Colleges and Universities, Presidential Scholar, NAACP Presidential Award, and the state of North Carolina NAACP Man of the Year. He has held several pastorates, the longest pastorate being in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, at the Golem Memorial AME Zion Church, where he remained for 20 years. He was elevated to the episcopacy from that church, elected the 100th bishop in the line of succession. I present to you a man who is married to the lovely Mrs. Jacqueline Inez Williams Larte and the father of 3, Solomon, Alicia, and Victoria. I present to you a man who is from the continent, but has lived here and brings together both of those experiences to share with us a wealth of knowledge and experience. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Bishop Seth O. Sibisai Larte, the presiding prelate of the Alabama-Florida Episcopal area, as well as the CEO and founder of 400 Years Celebration Incorporated.
Thank you so very, very much, Dr. McFadden, for that very, very kind presentation and introduction. Let me say good morning to all of my brothers and sisters who have joined us for this very important dialogue. Let me begin by acknowledging the God of creation, the Son of redemption, and the Spirit that regenerates us. To the ancestors whose footsteps we are following and on whose shoulders we stand as we look into the future. To our courageous leaders who fought intellectually, spiritually, and sometimes militarily for the emancipation and freedom from colonialism. To the beautiful people of Africa and Africans worldwide. To our esteemed and prestigious participants of this first annual United Universal Dialogue of Africans and People of African Origins. To Dr. Jonathan Weaver, founder and leader of the Pan-African Collective, a viable organ for present-day economic, educational, and cultural freedom. To the leadership of the Next Generation and Blood Crying Out movements, Dr. Jamal Finkley. This movement is seeking to bring together some 12 million children and youth around the world who will say no to drugs, to guns, crime, and incarceration. As of December 9th, 2020, some 16,309 children in some 17 chapters have pledged to remain free of drugs, guns, and violence. To Dr. Kathy Thomas McFadden, Executive Director for the 400 Years Celebration, Inc., the organization committed to promoting 400 years of progress by African Americans in America. to our missionary supervisor, Mrs. Jacqueline Inez Williams Lotte of the Alabama Florida Episcopal District, a lover of justice and Africa liberation, who spent 4 years in West Africa working for the betterment of women. To all gathered together today around the world, to the loyal, dedicated, and true friends of Africa, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to speak to you from the subject, a blueprint for Africa to take her rightful place in the human family. A blueprint for Africa to take her rightful place in the human family. When one looks at the picture of Africa, it can be described in this manner: the glory days, the days of the kings and the queens, the days when Moses walked the streets of Egypt, the days when Joseph actualized his dream in Egypt, the days when Jesus being pursued to be killed by Herod found safety in Africa, the days of the Ghana, Sangye, and Mali kingdoms. Those were the glory days. The picture can also be described as the dark days, the days of slavery, exploitation, colonialism, and then the days of abandonment. When we look at the deficits of colonialism, I have one picture in my mind of a huge hole left in Liberia from the exploits of mining by companies out of the United States of America. I can think of abandoned railroads, abandoned infrastructure. Those are days of abandonment. But through it all, we can also look to the days when Africa and its people of African origin worldwide will indeed, by the grace of God, rise again. Africa, with its 54 independent countries, is one of the most beautiful pieces of land on earth. The land is beautiful, the climate is awesome, the vegetation is great, the resources are enormous. Its history is astounding. The contributions of Africa to the world cannot be overlooked. Science, mathematics, even religion. When you think about the concept of one God, monotheism, it comes out of Africa. When we think about the Savior, Jesus, during this Christmas season, had it not been for Africa, when Herod tried to kill Jesus, had it not been for an African out of Libya who helped Jesus with his cross, I'm not sure what history would have been like. Today, my brothers and my sisters, we must work together to protect and to make the land of Africa once again productive. If you read the Bible that Christians use, you will discover that one of the first responsibilities given by the Creator to humanity was to take care of the land. For us to abandon the land, the continent, I believe, is to commit an act of divine disobedience. Africans and those who live worldwide are some of the most peaceful, beautiful, and elegant people on earth. However, with all of its beauty as a land and its people, Africa has been ambushed, betrayed, castrated, destroyed, exploited, fractured, and most of all, subjected to all kinds of genocidal activities. But I still believe that Africa's best days are yet to come. To elevate Africa to the heights that it can become, we must begin to communicate as Africans on the continent and those around the world. The time has come for us to either reason together for our common good, or we will perish together because of divisiveness, deceit, destruction from within as well as from without. We must move from a survival mindset to a mentality of success, advancement, sustainability, and economic stability. We must dialogue together in order to stop the wars on the continent. I say it again, we must dialogue together to stop the wars on the continent. Look with me at this picture. I asked myself the question, when was the last war fought in America, in Europe, or in Asia? I want you to understand that wars have become a weapon for destabilization, destruction, and setback. The last time war was fought on these shores of the United States was in the year 1890, a war between the US and the Indians. The last time a war was fought in Europe was in 1756, the French Revolution. The last time there was a major outbreak in Asia was in 1945. I say wars destabilizes, they're destructive, and they're setbacks. When you come to Africa, just a snapshot, nothing to boast about. You look at Liberia, 1980, Rwanda, 1990. As late as 2013, you had the South Sudan wars taking place even as we speak. These are just a few. Something is wrong with this picture. We as Africans and Africans around the world must realize that we are being used as pawns by other people. And when they give us guns to kill each other, they're not doing it to themselves. That's why we need to come together, dialogue and reason together. I say to you, my sisters and my brothers, Africa needs her sons and daughters around the world to focus again on Africa. Whether you realize it or not, outside of Africa, wherever you find yourself as an African, you are only a tenant and never a landlord. But Africa awaits her children. It is for this reason that I believe that dual citizenship is a crucial element for Africans and Africa worldwide. Let me say this, we must not be carried away by the developments in America, Asia, Europe. We must work to develop the continent. Our hosts, whether they be in America or Asia or Europe, they have a tendency to abuse us, harass us, and eventually deport us. Right here in America, up until 2018, some 8.3 million persons have been deported out of this country. In Europe, up until 2019, some 142,000 were put out of the European Union. I said to us, we must not become overly satisfied with the beautiful roads and the nice hospitals and all of the amenities of these countries, because one of these days, some crazy lunatic will be saying to us, go back home. And what a tragedy it will be to go back home to dirt roads and to go back home to lack of hospitals and lack of infrastructures. We are in these countries, but let us not forget, we have a home. We have a home base. It is called Africa, a beautiful place, a wealthy place, a marvelous place. We must not forget. With this kind of inhumane attitude toward people of other nationalities, it is necessary for us to work together to improve the health system in Africa, food production in Africa, education in Africa, communication, road network, viable economic infrastructure, and efficient preservation and production of our natural resources. There are some 54 countries that make up the continent of Africa. I'd ask the technician to put up a map for us to show you something about Africa. If you look at this map, it looks interesting. And that is because if you look very closely at this map, you will see that it is made up of the United States, China, India, Europe, France, Spain, Portugal, Italy. All of those countries can be placed on Africa, and Africa will still have a piece of land for her children who are abroad. I'm glad you see it there. When people talk about Africa, they talk about Africa as though it is a small piece of land. That's not the case. Look at China. You can place China on the continent, United States on the continent, Portugal on the continent. Even the UK can be placed out there in the Seychelles Islands. I'm talking about Africa, a beautiful place, a marvelous place, a place for all practical purposes. The Garden of Eden must have been constructed in this place. That's why I'm saying to all of us, we need to work together, struggle together, pray together to improve the lot of this continent. The failure to collectively work for the good of Africa and the people of Africa worldwide will expose us to being disrespected. We will never, ever be respected as a people until we respect ourselves enough to mobilize our intellectual, cultural, economic, and scientific abilities to design a plan of action for a comprehensive future of the continent. I'm saying to all of us that the failure to collectively work for the good of Africa and its people worldwide will subject us to what I call colonial gentrification. Gentrification is when you are relocated from a community, and because of the economics of that place, you cannot even come back to that place. And if we're not careful, China will be the next colonial master of Africa. And I want you to understand something. Whoever controls the waterways, whoever controls the transportation network, whoever controls the land, controls the rest of the world. And if China is permitted to take over and colonize Africa, all of us are going to be impacted. Why? Because let me say this to you. The 54 countries you find on the continent, every last one of them, except for one or two or three, they all have gold, diamond, bauxite, you name it. Whatever mineral that the world needs, you can find it in Africa. When the supervisor and I were in Africa, we had gone to this community. And when we got there, we saw a major operation going on. We saw a little town that had been relocated. Now, prior to the relocation, this little town had no running water, no electricity, no plumbing, none of the major infrastructures. Why were they being relocated? Because beneath that little village, beneath that dilapidated town, was enough gold and diamond to last for the next 20 years. World Bank, Canada, United States, Great Britain, they all were there digging that gold diamond out of that place. And so when people treat us like we are nobodies, I want you to stand up, lift your head up, stick your chest out, and let them know you are somebody, not just because you're saying it, but because of what history has to say, because of what God has said, because of what the land of Africa is all about. I want to say to you in closing, the time has come for us to work together, pray together, struggle together, dialogue together for the good of the continent. What if America still had independent countries? We call them states. What if Europe, with all that it has, you have the European Union? Africa must become an entity that is organically united. Because if we do not, I'm telling you, the 1.216 billion people on the continent will become slaves once again. And the rest of us who find ourselves in other parts of the world, we too will become slaves. But when we work together, when we pray together, when we struggle together, when we put our mentalities and our resources together, we can have a homeland that we can all be proud of. In closing, let us be reminded, let us understand that being a member of a tribe or a national origin, these are only the doors by which we enter into the world. We must never ever become, these doors of tribalism and nationalism must never ever become the barriers of civility, decency, and the respect for human life. Let me call upon those who are in the faith community to empower our people with a genuine faith that will make us to love God, love others, and to love ourselves. Let me call upon the NAACP, the Poor People's Campaign, Black Lives Matter, to be introduced to the continent. Let me call upon our business leaders to create a viable business plan for the maximum utilization of the resources of Africa. My brothers and my sisters, let me call upon our health professionals to make a yearly pilgrimage to provide health services to the less fortunate. One of the things that this particular dialogue is going to do, we are going to adopt mercyship as our opportunity for outreach. You'll be seeing in a few how you can help us provide some resources for mercyship. Mercyship goes to Africa and provides health care for the very least fortunate among us. And I want to call on those of us who are doctors. Yes, I know that we're dealing with COVID-19 and other kind of a pandemics, but Africa needs you. And so let me call upon our health professionals to make a yearly pilgrimage to provide health services to the least fortunate in Africa. We call upon all of our engineers to return and help build the continent so that Africa will once again rise to the heights that God intended for it to be. Just like the Republic of Ghana, every African country needs a positive law for dual citizenship for her children and open her arms to embrace her sons and daughters. Together, we can dialogue until Africa takes her rightful place among the human family. May God bless this united dialogue. May God bless the people of Africa. May God bless us all as we work together to provide a blueprint for Africa to take her rightful place among the family of the world. God bless you and keep you is our prayer.
Wow. Thank you so much, Bishop Larte, for that powerful and moving address that laid the foundation for the conversation that we will be having for the next few days. Thank you so very much. I want us to now quickly move to the next part of our agenda, and that is to hear from two very powerful presenters, Mr. Mel Foote, who is chair of the Constituency for Africa, and Dr. Julius Garvey, MD, part of the Northwell Health System, and allow me to introduce them to you at this point. Mr. Mel Foote has worked on African issues for more than 35 years. He is the founder and president of the Constituency for Africa, CFA, a 25-year-old Washington, D.C. based network of organizations, groups, and individuals committed to the progress and empowerment of Africa and African people worldwide. CFA's mission is to build public and private support for Africa and to help shape U.S. policies towards Africa. In 2002, Mr. Foote also founded the African American Unity Caucus, a broad-based coalition of African American and other Americans of African descent who lead or are leaders of African-focused organizations and groups to promote Pan-African cooperation and to link diaspora leaders in the Western Hemisphere with the African Union as a part of their 6th region outreach initiative. Further, he serves as a consultant to the World Bank on African diaspora issues, as well as advises the African Union's ambassador to the United States. Julius W. Garvey, MD, is a board certified cardiothoracic and vascular surgeon who practices in Long Island, New York. He is affiliated with Northwell Health System and is clinical associate professor of surgery at Albert Einstein College of Medicine. He has been on several educational and medical missions to Ghana, Senegal, Uganda, Mali, Sierra Leone, Jamaica, Haiti, South Sudan, and Ethiopia. He has been internationally schooled in England, Canada, Jamaica, and the United States. He lectures on the life and legacy of his father, the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Garvey and Mr. Mel Foote.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I think Dr. Garvey is going to go first, but if not, I'm ready to go. Let me go first.
All right.
First of all, Dr. McFadden, I'm really pleased to meet you yesterday. I do so much on Africa that every day is Africa for me, and I've been doing it for 40 years. But it's really pleased to, one thing to meet you as part of the conference, and another thing to meet you as part of the program. And I have to say, I'm very impressed. I want to first acknowledge Bishop Seth Larty. Wow, that was the most awesome presentation I've ever heard, especially from a faith-based leader. I think he nailed it. He hit the nail right on the head. I think he laid out all the critical issues. I'm excited about this effort, this conference, and I'm committed to working with you going forward. I see all kinds of opportunities that I can contribute and my organization could contribute. I think this is absolutely right on the. I want to also thank my good friend, Reverend Jonathan Weaver. Reverend Weaver and I go back at least 30 or 40 years, and we've done all kinds of things together. And whenever he calls to ask me to do something, I don't even hesitate. It's yes, Reverend Weaver. There's not a question of can you or would you. I absolutely believe in him. I think that he's a man of God. He's certainly a man of the people. He's a man of Africa. And so I'm really thrilled to, this is the end of the year, and this is a great way to end the year, quite frankly. I'm a member of Reverend Elford Street Baptist Church. Howard John Wesley is the pastor, and I certainly want to bring greetings on behalf of Elford Street Baptist. But as a way of background, I've always been involved in Africa. I really, you say 35 years, it's been 40 years now. I started out as a U.S. Peace Corps volunteer in Ethiopia and Eritrea in the early 70s, and I've been involved in Africa every day. My motivation has always been to help Africa and help African people. And I can say that my whole career, my entire career, has been devoted toward Africa. I've been to, I lived 7 years on the continent in Ethiopia, Eritrea, Somalia, Sudan, but I've been to at least 40 countries on the continent. I work on Africa every day. I know many of the heads of state on the continent. And I follow events, across the continent. I'm constantly asked to advise. This afternoon, I'll be talking with on Al Hura TV on the situation in Ethiopia and Tigray, an area that I know very well. So my organization, Constituency for Africa, was founded in 1990 as a project of the Relief and Development Agency, AfriCare. I was working in East Africa, and C-Payne Lucas, who was my boss then, asked me to come back to head up this new effort to educate Americans about Africa to improve cooperation and coordination. And so I formed the Constituency for Africa in 1990 as an effort to link all the Black organizations then, not so much to put them under one umbrella, because I don't think, we're kind of like cats. You can't herd us. We have to, have our space, and everybody got their views. So I respect all that, but I still think we need to be working together as a diaspora. We all need to share information. We all need to have access to opinion makers and decision makers. And so I formed the Constituency for Africa for that purpose, really to help to unite us in a symbiotic way that we can actually do better to help Africa. CFA is a small organization. It's always been small. We never had the resources to do what we do, but we have a powerful impact. We have a powerful network. We do influence U.S. policy. To me, if I'm in Washington, D.C., the job here in Washington is to influence the opinion makers, decision makers. And I can say that CFA over the years, we helped to shape the trade bill, the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act. We did all the lobby work for that. We helped to get George W. Bush to respond to HIV/AIDS in Africa and form PEPFAR. We came up, Ron Dellums was my chair then, and we came up with what we call the AIDS Marshall Plan. And George Bush took it, modeled it, and committed $15 billion to address HIV/AIDS in Africa. President Obama sent an envoy to me when he first came to power in 2008 and asked what could he work on in Africa, given the fact that the U.S. economy had crashed. Obama came to office and the U.S. economy was at rock bottom. So he could not focus on Africa because he had to focus on saving General Motors and saving jobs and saving us here in the United States. But he wanted to buy some time. So he asked me, what could he do that don't cost a whole lot of money that can show Africa that he cares? So I wrote a paper, and one of the ideals that I suggested he focus on was to focus on not so much spending your time on Mugabe and Biya and Bashir and the old African leaders, but focus on the young ones coming up. And that became the Young African Leaders Initiative, YALI, which I think is the most important project ever coming from the US government side. Empower the next generation is the best way to go forward. Educate people, put them in power. I wanted them to focus more on the diaspora, along with the young leaders in Africa who they're bringing to the United States. I wanted them to also engage the diaspora in the process, make sure the diaspora meet the young leaders in Africa, so that 10 years from now, we're looking at a very powerful Pan-African network. They haven't done that, but I'm going to continue to press that. That's on my agenda for the Biden administration. The press, a leadership network comprised of both African leaders as well as African American leaders and other Africans in the diaspora. So I've been involved in just about every major issue concerning the U.S. and Africa. Rwanda genocide. I got the White House to fly 40 of us to Rwanda to see firsthand what the impact of the genocide was and what the U.S. should do. Currently, I'm working with on the coronavirus in Africa. I'm working with the Africa Center for Disease Control based in Addis. And we're actually fostering all kinds of dialogue and making sure that the Congressional Black Caucus in the U.S. Congress is also in touch with the African policymakers on the ground in Africa. We're going to do a forum next month, and maybe we could partner on that, where we want to hear from the African CDC about their strategy to promote vaccinations in Africa to combat COVID-19. We're launching the COVID-19 vaccine programs here, and they're being launched in Europe. But what about Africa? There's more than 2 million cases of COVID-19 on the continent. Africa has fared much better than the rest of the world, but it still is a major challenge in countries like South Africa, Egypt, and elsewhere. And so we don't want it to get out of control. And so I think that that's what the diaspora should be doing. Now, the way forward, I see all kinds of opportunities. One thing that CFA has piloted was a series of town hall meetings around the country to educate Americans about Africa, to improve cooperation, and to build linkages among us. Perhaps we can talk about another round of town hall meetings in Chicago and Denver and Los Angeles, Atlanta, Houston, and all across the United States that we can engage members of the African Ambassador Corps. We can engage technical experts from Washington and elsewhere. And say what you want to say about COVID-19. It's been a devastating year, as we all know. I'm locked in my house like everybody else, social distancing and all that. But what it has also done is created the opportunity that we can talk via technology, as we're talking right now. We can talk on Zoom. And CFA, we do a lot of Zoom meetings, but now we're able to have very good partnerships in Africa, speakers coming from the continent, speakers who are in Europe, speakers who are in Trinidad, because of the Zoom technology. In the past, if I had a conference, I had to fly somebody from South Africa. How much did that cost? I had to rent a hotel room downtown. How much did that cost? You got to feed people, but using the technology is an ideal way for us to talk globally from the perspective of the diaspora. So I'm not going to speak long. I really wanted Dr. Garvey to really set the tone for this conversation. But I want to say I'm thrilled to be here. I congratulate you on pulling this thing together. I was thinking, wow, how are church leaders having this kind of conference right before Christmas? You should be working on your sermons. But you guys know more about this than I do. So I'm just saying, consider me a partner. I don't want to be the leader of anything. I'm a lieutenant. I like to work with people who are working. I like to work with the leaders. And I think Bishop Larty really laid out everything we need to hear. I don't know if we need to hear anybody else. We just need to talk about a strategic plan, an action plan to put a lot of the things that he laid out in action. He gave us a historical perspective, and I do a lot of reading, especially now I got all this time on my hand. And you look at the role of the Black church in Africa, it's absolutely fascinating. And I think the bishop basically touched on a lot of that. So I just want to say that I'm ecstatic to be here. I'm excited, and I definitely looking forward to being part of the partnership for the 400-year effort. So thank you very much, and I'll pass the torch to my godfather, Dr. Julius Garvey.
I guess I just go right into it since I'm up on the screen. I'd certainly like to thank Mel for passing the torch. And I'd like to thank the Reverend Weaver for having me. And I haven't had the opportunity to meet Bishop Larty, but I was certainly blown away by his introductory remarks and his vision for Africa and for the African diaspora as a unit. And he sounded a bit like my father, who was calling for Africa, for the Africans, those at home and those abroad. Last year, we commemorated the 400th year since the beginning of our enslavement as a people in America. 250 years of chattel slavery and 150 years of apartheid and subjugation under a system of institutional racism and white supremacy. It is good to reflect deeply on the ceaseless struggle to free ourselves and to live lives of decency, dignity, and prosperity. In this time of the pandemic of COVID-19 and the ongoing pandemic of police brutality, systemic racism, and economic recession, that we can graphically see the cumulative effect of living while being Black in white America. In large measure, the wealth of America was accumulated from the brutal extraction of forced, uncompensated labor from millions of our enslaved ancestors. Slavery wasn't abolished in 1865 at the end of the Civil War. What was abolished was the uncompensated labor from millions of enslaved Africans. As soon as the Civil War came to a close, it was clear that there could be no real freedom without a change of economic relations. Charles Sumner, a Republican senator from Massachusetts, wrote, "The great plantations, which have been the nurseries of the rebellion, must be broken up, and the freedmen must have the pieces." General Sherman's field order called for 40 acres and a mule for each freedman. Presidential reconstruction under Democratic President Andrew Johnson would immediately undermine this, as he restored the defeated Confederates to citizenship and gave them free rein to impose laws like the Black Codes, which would reestablish the economic and social conditions that existed under slavery. The attempt at Reconstruction ended in 1876 as the federal government gave in to the interests of the capitalist forces of the reconstituted South. So what has persisted is the culture of slavery, and central to this is the sense that whites are superior to Blacks, and it is their duty to control and suppress Black freedom. This was done in various ways, such as lynching, incarceration, segregation, discriminatory laws, police brutality, and mob rule. In this sense, slavery was not abolished until the civil rights movement of the 60s, led by Martin Luther King and his cohorts. King achieved the Civil Rights and Voting Rights Acts of 1964 and 1965 under President Johnson. Dr. King wrote at that time in his A Testament of Hope, "The Black Revolution is much more than a struggle for the rights of Negroes. It is forcing America to face all of its interrelated flaws: racism, poverty, militarism, and materialism. It is exposing evils that are rooted deeply in the whole structure of our society. It reveals systemic rather than superficial flaws and suggests that radical reconstruction of society itself is the real issue to be faced." Of course, in the rest of the world, African people were being subjugated and fighting against that same type of subjugation. We revolted in the Caribbean. The most successful revolt was the Haitian Revolution that culminated in 1804. On the continent of Africa itself, it had gone from the devastation of slavery to colonialism at the end of the 19th century, where all of Africa was divided up. And as we have heard mentioned, we now have 54 independent states, so that Africa was parceled out to the control of different European powers. Everyone got a piece of Africa. There was significant freedom movements and anti-colonial struggles conducted by people such as Kwame Nkrumah, Sekou Toure, and different leaders, Lumumba in the Belgian Congo, and others in different parts of the African continent, including South Africa, where Nelson Mandela, of course, took up the torch there. So all over the world, wherever there were African people, we had been subjugated, and we were fighting against that and developing independence and freedom movements. At the end of the 60s, we had the assassination of Martin Luther King, and we had the riots of the 60s. here in America, the Rodney King riots of the 90s, the murders of Emmett Till, Amadou Diallo, Michael Brown, Tamir Rice, Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, and many others. And now, of course, George Floyd, murdered in cold blood for the whole world to see. How far then have we come in orchestrating our own freedom and development in this time and in these United States? Let's look at a few parameters. One, family wealth. The average wealth of a white family is 7 times the wealth of a Black family. 2, poverty. The poverty rate for Blacks is about 20%, and for whites, about 10%. 3, completing college. For African Americans, the increase is from 4% in 1962 to 25% in 2019. For whites, it's from 10% to 37%. Jobs. The white unemployment rate has been consistently about half of the Black unemployment rate since figures were kept in the 1970s. Wages. The average income of Black households has been about 60% of white households. This hasn't changed in the last 50 years. Representation in Congress. The current Congress has 55 African American members, up from 4 in the early 60s. If we look at that 7 times wealth disparity between Blacks and whites, we see that it is wealth, not wages, that is the foundation of security in America as well as elsewhere. Wealth as assets minus debt is what allows you to buy a home in a crime-free neighborhood with good schools and other amenities. It is wealth that allows you to send your kids to college or meet family emergencies without becoming destitute or homeless. It is wealth that provides security and peace of mind. It is not incidental that wealthier people are healthier and live longer. If we look at Africa and what has transpired since the 60s and independence, and many African countries achieved independence, certainly Ghana in 1957, Nigeria in the 60s, and many, many others in the 60s and subsequently. And we see that Africa was led into a debt trap, and we see that the IMF and the World Bank exercised control over the way in which money was spent on the continent, so that money that was accumulated had to be used to pay off debt at the expense of education and at the expense of healthcare and at the expense of development. And if we look at another epidemic, the Ebola epidemic of recent memory, we can see certainly Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea. The basis for that is the encroachment on virgin territory, the mining and the extraction of different resources that I think Bishop Larty just told us about, a whole village that was moved. This is exactly what is happening in terms of disrupting ecosystems. So when you disrupt ecosystems for this wholesale onslaught to obtain resources, then you allow different viruses, bacteria, and animals, etc., bats and what have you, then to interact with the population, and that's how we get pandemics. So, and we look again at HIV, and we see HIV didn't start necessarily with African people or those who had HIV. The disparity was definitely significant between the African person who had HIV and the European person who had HIV, and we've seen it in different American cities, in Baltimore, etc., where access to medical care and so on was totally different, and the mortality rate was totally different among African Americans and a European population in America. So we are at this critical juncture of American society, and we can see a nation being humbled by the COVID-19 pandemic with the largest caseload and deaths worldwide. An incompetent president and government unable to cope with the extent of the challenge presented. We have an economy that has imploded with millions unemployed and without adequate economic or financial support at the present time. We have a prison industrial complex that has incarcerated 2.3 million people, the largest number in the world. And of course, in this sense, America is exceptional, as our president likes to say. 40% of those incarcerated are Black. We have increasing hazards of deadly weather patterns that brings hurricanes, tornadoes, mudslides, drought, and fires to large areas of the country. And of course, with increased mortality in these areas. We have a military industrial complex that takes the largest proportion of the country's wealth away from subsidizing different changes that are needed within the society in terms of more equitable distribution of wealth and services. We have a socioeconomic system where a small elite of 5 to 10% controls 80% of the wealth. We have a policing system that treats Black and brown people as an enemy that they are at war with, and of course they are militarized in terms of the weaponry that they have. A political system that elects the candidates who can raise the most money, and a society without a national healthcare system. Clearly, such an unjust society is not sustainable and should not be emulated by African countries. James Boggs wrote in 1963, he was an activist, he said, the strength of the Negro cause and its power to transform the nation comes from the fact that it's a struggle for human rights and equality in human relations, in production, consumption, in the universities, in transportation, in government, and every sphere of human endeavor. In other words, the struggle to create an egalitarian society. Today, in our struggle, we are face to face with conditions worldwide in a civilization that is competing with itself for its own destruction. A civilization that cannot last because it has no spiritual foundation. It is built on greed, theft, injustice, viciousness, and corruption. Its gods are power, profits, and weapons. As Mary McLeod Bethune would say, our job then is to remake the world, nothing less than this, for in liberating ourselves, we will free all humanity. It's important for us to focus on some elements of health. And I would like to describe the social determinants of health. And we should recognize that only 20% of health really comes from clinical encounters with a physician. 30% comes from the behavior of the individual. 40% comes from socioeconomic circumstances, and 10% from the environment in which you live. If you live in a toxic situation, or if you have asbestos in the environment where you work, or if you have lead in the water or in the walls in your paint, etc. So in terms of transformation that is needed here for us in the African American community, I can simply run through a few of these. We certainly need reparations for 250 years of uncompensated labor. We need funding for entrepreneurship and development and cooperative enterprise. We need land for social and economic development, funds for health and wellness programs in Black communities, improve banking facilities and access to credit in Black communities, increase educational resources and community control of curriculum, funding for skills training, reformation of the criminal justice system, and affordable housing. These are some of the things that we have to focus on with the new administration coming in, the Biden-Harris administration. And in all of this, we must take Africa as our moral ideal. And I mean by this that those that are sourced, those ideals that are sourced in ancient Kemet and kept alive by the Bantu people as Ubuntu, and in the traditional ways of the Yoruba, Ashanti, and other African peoples, expressed as our highest views and values of communal living and right relations with other human beings, with nature, and with the divine. With our understanding of our history and communitarian African way of life, we can engage in system-changing work and commit ourselves to the creation of a just and moral society and expanding good in the world. I will look more closely at the health sector and changes that can be made and that we can initiate. If one looks at the American situation, $95 trillion is the estimated burden to the US economy by chronic diseases over the next 35 years. Indirect healthcare costs, disability, and lost productivity. Diabetes, heart and vascular diseases, cancer, dementia, arthritis, and obesity are causative. The number one factor causing these deaths is a bad diet, exceeding tobacco usage and other known risk factors. 70% of deaths worldwide are from these non-communicable diseases. And this is happening also at the same time in Africa, even though communicable diseases have not been fully controlled on the African continent. Over the last 40 years, we have created the worst diet in the world. I'm speaking here of the United States. Approximately 60% of our calories come from ultra-processed foods with high fructose content and hydrogenated fat for taste and with toxic additives for added shelf life. This has led to obesity and disease, and also micronutrient deficiencies and malnutrition. This epidemic of chronic diseases is due to a combination of physical inactivity, smoking, excess alcohol consumption, stress, and our food system as the biggest contributor. The good news is that we don't need medical breakthroughs or genetic manipulation to achieve and maintain vibrant health. The foods you consume can heal you faster, better, and without side effects than the most expensive prescription drugs by big pharma or surgical procedures at fancy institutions. The ideal diet is plant-based whole foods. Vegetables, fruits, nuts, beans, legumes, whole grains. Avoid processed foods and animal products. Reduce salt, sugar, and oils. Aim for 80% of your calories from carbohydrates, 10% from fat, and 10% from protein. This diet, along with lifestyle changes, such as exercise, smoking cessation, stress reduction, meditation, and psychosocial group support, will be far more effective in promoting health and preventing disease than prescription drugs, surgery, or genetic manipulation. When diet and lifestyle are adjusted and we are in balance with our environment, the body has a remarkable capacity for healing itself. The root meaning of health is wholeness. In an ideal whole, there's a harmonious integration and balance in the arrangement of components. This leads to perfection, which physically is health. But perfection, balance, and beauty are also characteristics of holiness. So we must be whole and holy to be perfectly healthy. We need a new definition of health. It's not simply an absence of disease. This is the optimal functioning of the organism efficiently and in balance with itself as well as with the environment. Religion and medicine have a common ground. Our traditional medicine men and shamans know this. Our medical doctors have forgotten this connection and narrowed their view to the physical body and the material aspects of illness. Science and intellect can show us mechanisms and details of physical reality, which has value, but cannot show the relationship to spirit, soul, and psyche, which is very often the source of imbalance that leads to dis-ease. Our body signals the balance or imbalance with our external environment, as well as our internal environment. So we must listen to our body for signs of disease and seek remedies with a holistic healthcare system, not a disease treatment system, which is what we now have. Integrative medicine is healing-oriented medicine that takes account of the whole person, body, mind, and spirit, as well as all aspects of lifestyle, and it makes use of all available therapies, conventional and alternative. It focuses medicine on health and healing rather than on disease and treatment. Healing comes from inside. It is the body's natural attempt to restore equilibrium when equilibrium is lost. Agents of disease are not causes of disease. Germs are agents of disease. For example, COVID-19 can inflame the lining of the bronchial tubes, cause irritation and cough. However, not everyone exposed to the virus gets sick, only those susceptible. That means those in a state of disequilibrium of their natural health factors, also called resistance or immunity. So instead of waging wars on disease agents with the hope of eliminating them, we need to worry more about strengthening our resistance to them and living in correct balance with nature. Allopathic medicine is very good at managing trauma, bacterial infections, medical and surgical emergencies. It is very bad at managing viral infections, chronic degenerative diseases, allergies, autoimmune diseases, and mental illness. All those conditions in which the mind plays a role in creating susceptibility to disease. So people have to take more responsibility for their own health, to practice truly preventative medicine on their own, and make intelligent choices of practitioners and treatment when needed. It has been forgotten that in the last century, the greatest gains in health and life expectancy have come from public health measures, not medical ones. Improved sanitation, clean water, clean air, safe food, quarantines, automobile and workplace safety laws, tobacco and alcohol control, etc. We have vaccines and antibiotics, and we have infectious diseases and a safe environment covered. No more yellow fever, cholera, smallpox, polio, or tuberculosis. Clinical medicine has shown enormous gains in treatment of disease and extraordinary diagnostic methods such as CAT scans, PET scans, and MRIs. However, 1 in 2 Americans now has a chronic disease, and 1 in 4 has multiple chronic diseases. Chronic diseases cause 7 out of 10 deaths in the United States and accounts for 86% of healthcare expenditures, 91% of prescriptions, and 76% of physicians' visits. It's interesting that China has an ancient history of herbal medicine. India has its own Ayurvedic medical system, but it seems as if Africa has forgotten its plant-based medicine and has moved away from that. The historic usage of herbal medicine for over 5,000 herbs provides some level of confidence about safety and efficacy. In Germany, for example, 80% of German physicians regularly prescribe plant-based medicines. There are 600 to 700 different plant drugs that are sold to treat common conditions. Here in the United States, many more people are moving towards herbal remedies, spices and herbal cosmetics. Popular herbs such as ginkgo biloba are used to treat dementia, poor memory, and circulatory disorders. Saw palmetto for the treatment of benign prostatic hypertrophy. Kava kava used for anxiety, insomnia, and depression. Valerian for sleeping problems. St. John's wort as a treatment as an antidepressant. Echinacea to boost immunity. And if we look at 155 anti-cancer drugs developed since the 1940s, 73% were either natural products or a derivative. such as the periwinkle plant, which is, grows wild in the Caribbean and in Africa, from which has been made vincristine and vinblastin extracts that are now used to treat childhood leukemia and Hodgkin's diseases. Taxol, paclitaxel, extracted from the bark of the Pacific yew tree, and is being used to treat ovarian, breast, and lung cancer. So we don't necessarily need to depend on big pharma per se. Plant-based medicine is of extreme importance. Although our healthcare system here in the United States is the most expensive in the world, we rank last out of 11 developed countries in performance results. There is every indication that the current chronic disease epidemic will get worse. The Western way of life, which is of course exported around the world, is a highly processed artificial food filled with chemicals and toxic substances everywhere, from skincare to household products to gardening supplies, and the combination of increasing stress, anxiety, activity, and decreased sleep are a setup for disease. The epigenetic environment triggers genetic expression towards disease and a shortened lifespan. The current medical model is clearly broken. It should not be imitated by Africa or African people anywhere. What is needed is a paradigm shift towards integrative medicine. Preventing disease before it occurs should always be the primary goal. We can achieve the goals of prevention and true healthcare by connecting our patients with a team of people who can work with them effectively to change diet, lifestyle, and behaviors, and by having a robust public health system that reaches out to our communities. We can then rely on plants for food as well as for medicine. I think then we'll have a healthier society at a much lower cost. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much for that information, Dr. Garvey. That was a lot of information, but it was information that we needed to hear, information that I hope that during our panel discussion, we can engage you and Mr. Foote for some of the things that you've said. And so to both of you, Mr. Foote and to Dr. Garvey, thank you so much for the contribution that you make in order to ensure that people are made aware and that something is being done. It's one thing to be made aware and not do anything, but it's another thing to be made aware and yet put our, for a lack of a better word, our money where our mouths are. And so again, thank you. We're going to take a quick break and then we're going to come back with our panel discussion, and we hope that you both will join us for that. The video that you're about to see is we take about a 10-minute break. Stretch your cells, go get something real quick, but come on back and join us. You're about to see a video about mercy ships. And mercy ships travel to the countries of Africa to provide much needed surgeries. And the 400 Years Celebration Organization is partnering with mercy ships in order to provide some of the much needed funding in order for them to continue their work. And so not only will you see videos throughout this conference for the next 3 days, but you'll also see a way that you are able to give, not just to mercy ships, but also to 400 years, that we might continue the work that has begun. And so take a little break, watch this video, and then come back and join us in 10.
À l'école, les pieds faisaient mal, donc ça m'empêchait. Il fallait toujours que j'emprunte la moto pour arriver à l'école. Comme puiser de l'eau, je ne pouvais pas. Même à l'eau change, je ne pouvais pas. Donc j'étais obligée de rester.
Bon, ce qui m'a trop fait mal, c'est parce que partout où Julienne passait, on la regardait toujours mal. Il y a même des gens qui avançaient des mots. Une femme enceinte ne peut pas vite se cacher de façon que son enfant ne doit pas ressembler à Julienne. Donc, j'avais ce qui me renforce, ce qui me donnait souvent la force, c'est par rapport à elle-même. Dans ma tête, quand j'ai d'abord vu qu'on a d'abord, mais je ne suis pas d'abord appelée Julienne, je pouvais d'abord sauter de joie, mourir de joie. Je n'avais même pas, même un peu de soucis quelque part. Mais je sais ici là, elle peut déjà s'en sortir dans sa vie sans problème.
Maintenant, c'est que je peux y aller marcher avec mes amis. Peut-être que si on va aller se balader, je n'aurais plus besoin de l'aide qu'attendait un peu. Je m'assois pour me reposer. Je peux y aller marcher comme je veux. Et c'est très fier. C'est pour ça que je remercie Dieu et merci Chic et tout le monde qui m'a gardé là-bas tout le long de mon séjour. À l'école, les pieds faisaient mal, donc ça m'empêchait. Il fallait toujours que j'emprunte la moto pour arriver à l'école. Comme puiser de l'eau, je ne pouvais pas. Même à l'eau change, je ne pouvais pas. Donc j'étais obligée de rester.
Bon, ce qui m'a trop fait mal, c'est parce que partout où Julienne passait, on la regardait toujours mal. Il y a même des gens qui avançaient des mots. Une femme enceinte ne peut pas vite se cacher de façon que son enfant ne doit pas ressembler à Julienne. J'avais ce qui me renforce, ce qui me donnait souvent la force, c'est par rapport à elle-même. Dans ma tête, quand j'ai d'abord vu qu'on a d'abord, mais si je ne suis pas d'abord appelée Julienne, je pouvais d'abord sauter de joie, mourir de joie. Je n'avais même pas eu même un peu de soucis quelque part. Mais je sais qu'ici, là, elle peut déjà s'en sortir dans sa vie sans problème.
Maintenant, c'est que je peux y aller marcher avec mes amis. Peut-être que si on va aller se balader, je n'aurais plus besoin de l'aide qu'attendait un peu. Je m'assois pour me reposer. Je peux y aller marcher comme je veux. Et c'est très fier. C'est pour ça que je remercie Dieu et merci Chip et tout le monde qui m'a regardé là-bas tout au long de mon séjour. À l'école, les pieds faisaient mal, donc ça m'empêchait. Il fallait toujours que j'emprunte la moto pour arriver à l'école. Comme puiser de l'eau, je ne pouvais pas. Même à l'eau change, je ne pouvais pas. Donc j'étais obligée de rester.
Bon, ce qui m'a trop fait mal, c'est parce que partout où Julienne passait, on la regardait toujours mal. Il y a même des gens qui avançaient des mots. Une femme enceinte ne peut pas vite se cacher de façon que son enfant ne doit pas ressembler à Julienne. Bon, j'avais ce qui me renforce, ce qui me donnait souvent la force, c'est par rapport à elle. Dans ma tête, quand j'ai d'abord vu qu'on a d'abord, même si je ne suis pas d'abord appelée Julienne, je pouvais d'abord sauter de joie, de mourir de joie. Je n'avais même pas eu même un peu de soucis quelque part. Mais je sais qu'ici, là, elle peut déjà s'en sortir dans sa vie sans problème.
Maintenant, c'est que je peux y aller marcher avec mes amis. Peut-être que si on va aller se balader, je n'aurais plus besoin de l'aide qu'attendait un peu. Je m'assois pour me reposer. Je peux y aller marcher comme je veux. Et c'est très fier. C'est pour ça que je remercie Dieu et merci Chip et tout le monde qui m'a regardé là-bas tout au long de mon séjour.
We are back. I hope that you enjoyed that break. Again, we want to say thank you to Bishop Larte for setting the tone, for Dr. Julius Garvey, for Mr. Melvin Foote, for your presentations. And now we want to engage in a panel discussion. And so we're going to invite Bishop Larte to join us as well. And allow me to introduce to you Sylvanus Ayeni, Dr. Sylvanus Ayeni. Born and raised in Nigeria, he is a retired neurosurgeon living in Maryland. He has several decades of involvement in education and healthcare sectors in sub-Saharan Africa in both academic and non-academic settings. He's the author of the nonfiction book, Rescue Thyself, Change in Sub-Saharan Africa Must Come From Within. He's the president and founder of Praying Africa Children Advocacy Watch, Incorporated, a nonprofit organization involving in education of children in poor communities in Nigeria. And so we've got a wealth of knowledge at our fingertips. And I'm going to ask if Dr. Ayeni would just give us an opening statement by way of introducing himself, and then we will continue dialoguing with these brilliant, right now, men and me. All right, Dr. Ayeni? Unmute yourself. Dr. Ayeni, unmute yourself. There you go. Thank you,
Good
sir.
morning, Dr. McFadden.
Good morning, sir. Welcome.
Thank you.
By way of introduction, we just want you to share a little bit about the theme, or maybe even something that you heard today. And then we're going to get right into our panel discussion with some questions around the powerful presentations that you have made, that they have made today. So by way of introduction, just give us a little bit about yourself and your work.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. McFadden. My name is Sylvanus Adetokunbo Ayeni. Sylvanus is my baptismal name. You know, when I was baptized at the age of 12 in a Baptist church in Abeokuta, Nigeria, in the old days. So I took up that Christian name. Adetokunbo is my native name. I grew up in Nigeria, where I graduated from medical school in 1972. And then subsequently, I trained in this country as a neurosurgeon. And I've also done fellowships in Germany, in Japan. I spent one academic session in Japan. And I've been involved in African development issues in healthcare and education sectors for many, many years. So I am the founder and president of Pan-Africa Children Advocacy Watch. And I've also been on medical missions to African nations, Ghana. I was visiting faculty at Orota Medical School in Eritrea in 2008. So I've done a few things here and there, and I have some very strong feelings about the leadership issues in Africa, because I agree with everything that Mr. Foote and Dr. Garvey and of course, Bishop Larry. I really admire everything they said, but we have to speak to the leadership crisis in the continent. And that's what I'm going to focus on. Based on my experience over decades
frustration and trying to get things done on the continent.
All right, well, thank you. I want to ask our tech to bring all of our panelists on that we might have a conversation. Here they come, here they come, here they come. All right, I want to let those who are watching us via Facebook or YouTube or by the website, first of all, thank you so much for joining us for this very important, much needed and long overdue conversation. And I want to share with you, in case you did not know, that each day of the dialogue, there is a particular theme. And today's theme is understanding the health and educational disparities among Africans worldwide and the need for a greater connection. And so we heard each one of them speak very profoundly to that particular subject. And so there is one question in our chat, in our Zoom, and I'm going to read it. And it says, the question, if we live where we can learn how to refine gold, cut diamonds, make steel, refine copper, make chocolate, and many other refined products that Africa and the rest of the world needs, and bring the added value to Africa rather than allowing it to move out of Africa. We should focus on this as our first priority to gain the wealth needed to rebuild Africa. We have the ability to help Africa to do for ourselves if we choose. And I'm going to invite Bishop Lartey to speak to that based on his comments that he made to us in his opening address. And then any one of you may also respond to that, and then we'll go into some other questions.
Thank you very, very much. That's a very, very important question. Let me give you an example of the challenge. In Liberia, you have the largest rubber plantation owned by Firestone Company, the largest. And all of these years, Liberia has been asking Firestone to build a factory to process the raw material into product that can be used on your cars. And Firestone have consistently said that the market is not available to build such a factory. And then I came to North Carolina and went to visit with our supervisor at the time when we're in college together. And she is from a place called Elm City, North Carolina. And between Elm City and Wilson, North Carolina, you have less than 1,000 people living in that particular area. And what did I see? I saw a factory by Firestone Company that manufactures rubber into tires on your cars. And so part of the challenge that you're hearing is that most of the conversations around economics are mostly incomprehensive. And as a result, these major companies take the raw materials. And you heard me talk about the war situation, because a part of the strategy is to, Dr. Ayane was talking about corruption and leadership, etc. It's part of that they will give us arms and put two brothers to fight each other. And while we are fighting, they're grabbing the material and walking away with it. You talk about the cocoa there in Ivory Coast and other parts. We have the raw materials. However, they do not want us to build the kind of factories to manufacture those raw products into usable. Because if you just take the raw material out, the price tag is quite different from when it is actually produced. And so these are some of the struggles. And that's the reason why, for me, I believe that Africa needs the total brain power of all of its children. Those of you who are here, those in Europe, wherever we are, we need to come together and to say to people who want to exploit us, enough is enough. So yes, it is possible, but the difficulty sometimes comes in the negotiations when these factories want to come. And because we are, in a survivalistic mode, we don't have that kind of a longevity to wait to negotiate for factory, etc. If the person comes and says, we want this amount and want that amount, we're hungry. We want to get our healthcare going, we want our roads, etc., etc. And the leaders become so hasty in negotiating, and the end result is that we do not get the best of it. So what you're asking is a great question. The challenge is that because we're operating from a deficit position, and that is we don't have our own factories, our own companies, etc. These people come and they take advantage of us.
And I think the very fact that we're having this conversation, and the very fact that we're not just having it among ourselves, that we are having it, and prayerfully, hopefully, it's being shared worldwide, that again, as I said in the beginning, this is not just a conversation to be had just because we don't have anything to do. It's a conversation that implores us to a call to action. A call to action. So we see the problem, and now we hope through the various organizations that are connected that we begin to address the problem in real time. Did anyone else want to address that? Mr. Foote.
Yeah, provocative question, and I think Bishop, your response is also equally provocative. Let's understand that this problem goes back hundreds of years. This is not something that just has arisen. We're talking about, I went to Brussels one time and went to Geneva, and they were advertising Swiss chocolate. You can buy it at the airport, Swiss chocolate. There's not one chocolate tree in Switzerland. We're talking about Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, and so Africa, when they had the Berlin Conference and they divided Africa up into all these little small states, and you go to Senegal and they speak in French. You go across the river to Gambia, they're speaking English, and they're the same people, they're the same very people, but they have divided them up, given them a flag. You go to a little small country like Togo, which is not as big as Washington, D.C., and yet they got to have an army, they got to have an embassy, they got to have a president, they got to have all the trappings of a government, and the country is not big enough to be a country, And so it was intentional to divide Africa up and to fragment it and to get the left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing. All of that is what we're still dealing with. I'm looking at Ethiopia, Eritrea, Tigray, same people, but the Ukraine gives them weapons or sells them weapons, Russia sells them weapons, China sells them weapons. The only ones who are dying are African. And then they want me to pick a side. Oh, we don't like the Tigrayans. What are you talking about? The most Pan-African people in the world really are the African Americans, quite frankly. We love all Africans from Cairo to Cape Town. Most Americans are uneducated, undereducated, or miseducated about Africa, period. And so when we're talking about issues of trade, they don't want Africa to be able to control Africa's destiny. The whole discussion during the Trump administration has been over diamonds. Sure enough, we got involved in the Congo because we see diamond, coltan, we see all these minerals that we want to have strategic access to. It's not about the quality of life of the Congolese people, it's about access to their mineral resources. So let's not fool ourselves. Go to Guinea, all this bauxite mining and whatnot. Is this for the Guinean people? No, it's for the access to the international market, and the very little of the profit, very little of the benefit are gonna go to Africa. We're getting mad at Rwanda because they don't want to import used clothing, from the US. All of the old clothing, they could sell them to Africa. They're walking around with Michael Jordan T-shirt on. Rwanda want to produce their own clothing with their own fashion, and yet the U.S. trade paradigm is saying no. So my point is, we in the diaspora here in the United States, especially here in Washington, we have got to lobby our government to do the right thing. So part of this whole strategy, the Black church across the country is the most powerful institution in the Black community, but they have not always moved in the right direction of policy. I'm in the World Bank. I'm in the State Department. I'm involved in these discussions in Washington. Why don't we need a constituency to support our efforts? And so I'm hoping that one of the things that could come out of this is a realization that, boy, we have all this network. How do we best impact U.S. policy toward Africa? Right now, we should be lobbying. Like right now, one of the things that Trump did, pulled all the Blacks out of the diplomatic corps. There's no African-American ambassadors in Africa. There's only one Black ambassador, period. He's a Congolese American working in Senegal. Now, come on. One thing I can say about George Bush, he had the strongest Africa bureau in the history of our country. They were the best. He had at least 10 ambassadors in Africa were Black. The Assistant Secretary for Africa, Jendai Frazier, was Black. Her deputy was Black. Colin Powell was Secretary of State. Look at us now. So the biggest challenge we're going to have with the Biden administration is to reverse this. And so we're going to need the Black church fully behind us in the lobby effort. We're going to need you to raise your voices. We're going to need you to do op-eds in the various newspapers and so forth. We got to make you call in. If you don't agonize, rather than to agonize, we got to organize. Don't agonize, organize. But I think it's a provocative question, but we have a lot of work to do. We need to be thinking about a sort of a caucus after this conference, to talk about the strategy, and that's really where I come in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and you're right. Part of the dialogue is to create awareness and to educate. I see you, Dr. Gowrie. Is to educate, because I do believe the average person realizes that gold and diamonds do come from Africa, but I don't know how many people really understood about chocolate. And so again, some of the information that you've shared is some information that people may be hearing for the first time or not paying attention to, but you're right. I think we need to do both. We need to agonize and organize. We need to agonize and organize. Don't leave out the agonizing, because when you agonize enough, folks, I do believe, begin to change their mind if they do nothing else but just get rid of us. So let's agonize and organize. Dr. Garvey, you wanted to speak.
Yes, I just wanted to make a point in terms of what Bishop Larty said about Liberia and Firestone. Marcus Garvey and the Universal Negro Improvement Association had a deal with President King for those same 1 million acres that ended up being deeded to Firestone. It was signed with President King and the UNIA for the development of that area by the UNIA. And the UNIA sent over surveyors, sent over engineers, sent over equipment based on the mutual agreement. And then, of course, somebody from the American US establishment whispered in President King's ear that this should not happen. So that the agreement was torn up or denied. And that same land that was deeded to Marcus Garvey and the UNIA went to Firestone. And as you say, look what has happened now 100 years later. So this leads us to leadership. And I think that's the critical thing. And, I think, Dr. Ayeni, I'm not sure whether it's Ayeni or Adeni, he was hitting on that point, and I wish he would elaborate, because I don't want to necessarily go into that, but from my own perspective. But the problem is failed leadership since the 60s. And we know a little bit why that leadership has failed, because, for example, the CIA took down Kwame Nkrumah, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But maybe Dr. Sylvanus would like to come in on that. But I just wanted that historical perspective that a diaspora organization went to help to rebuild Liberia and to bring it into the industrial age. And President King at that time abrogated the agreement and gave it to Firestone. And here we are 100 years later.
Dr. Ayeni, you want to respond?
Well, actually, this leadership crisis is the main theme of my five-minute presentation in the next session. But just to respond to this question, you see, the 50, 55, 60-year history of independence in Africa has convinced some of us that these nations cannot be built from without. You see, the efforts of the diaspora and all the well-meaning people across the Mediterranean Sea, across the Atlantic, across the Arabian Sea, across the Pacific Ocean, okay? All that it can do is to help Africans to help themselves. Africans have to own their destiny. They know where they want to go. You want to go from point A to point B, you have to be the captain of the ship. So this is where I'm coming from in the issue of leadership. It is a two-way street. And we have to realize that at the end of the day, okay, Europeans, Americans, North Americans, it is not in their own best interest for Africa to become the #1 continent in the world. We have to realize that. It is not in their best interest, no matter how much money, how much expertise, World Bank, IMF, all the foundations. No, they don't want Africa to be the powerhouse continent of the 21st century. Of course not. We live in a competitive world. So it is a two-way street. That's where I'm coming from.
And so, you know, Dr. Garvey and many of you have talked about the wealth disparities of European Americans and African Americans, and of course on the continent. But the question is, what do we begin to do about? It's not, I think Dr. Garvey, you said something about it's not wealth, it's wages. And so, you know, that is obviously a problem that we need to deal with. Where do we begin?
I think, Dr. McFadden, we begin exactly where we are here today. Begin with a dialogue, and out of the dialogue, we can develop a strategic plan. When you think about the Jewish Fund, you know that particular fund was developed after the atrocities of several million people being gassed and killed. So they came up with a plan. We need to come up with a plan that will address our health issues, our economic issues, our educational issues. We need to come up with a plan. And this panel here is made up of some renowned individuals. One of the things I continue to share with our missionaries, whenever we have annual conference, they come with wonderful, marvelous reports, and they're doing a lot, but nobody knows. Nobody knows. I mean, the men that I'm with today and what I'm hearing that you're doing, this is the very reason for the direction that we have chosen to go into, that what we need is a dialogue. Let's find out who's doing what. And that's one of the reasons why after this is all over with, we want to develop 12 respective commissions that will address each of these areas so that we begin to bring to the table each of us who are doing something And out of the coming together, we can now develop a master plan. A master plan. Imagine a 100 years plan, solid for the development of that continent. We can address all of these things, whether it is leadership, whatever. We just need a plan. But the plan can only come out of us coming together such as this and talking and learning each other and where we need to go. I think it's about a plan that we need.
If I can just add to that, I think about this stuff all the time in my work. I think we really need to be talking about a 100-year plan or something like that. Now, all of us, won't be around. Dr. Garvey said he's going to take another 100 years, but I don't think the majority of us are going to be around to see it. But it's hard to, they say if you want to plan for 1 year, you plant a crop. And if you want to plan for a decade, you plant a tree. And if you want to plan for a century, you educate the people. I think we ought to, like one of the things I think that we do, one of the things CFA is doing right now, we're starting to partner with the African diaspora in Canada. And we have real programs that we work together on. We have real dialogue. We put it together, African diaspora of Canada, African diaspora of the United States, just to get comfortable working with one another, I'm thinking as we go along here, for instance, certainly the women are not here except for Dr. McFadden. And that's an error, that's an error. The young people are not here. I think the youngest person on this call probably is me, and I'm
not.
But
It's me. I'm young at heart.
You get my point. The point is we are absolutely got to engage the next generation of leadership in this conversation. I'm also thinking that we got to have a stronger dialogue with Africans on the ground in Africa. I'm talking to them, especially with the technologies. I'm talking to Bobby Wine over in Uganda, trying to beat up on Museveni. I'm talking to all kinds of, I'll be on a dialogue the next week with young African leaders who are celebrating Africa's, the signing of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, which goes into effect in January 1. And so they're having this conversation, and I'm kind of like the diaspora representative on this panel. It's an August panel. But we ought to be getting Tony Alumalo, Dan Gote, Strive down in South. We ought to be having this conversation among those who are privileged enough to be able to deliver. If we need to talk about bringing together $100 billion of capital together, we got to get all of these people on the same page. And so I'm thinking that the strategy has got to be 100-year at least, because this is not going to change. It ain't going to change next year. I don't care if Black Lives Matter, we have a protest and we beat up on Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. It's not going to change. So we got to as we talk about this commission, we got to think broadly about how do we engage this diaspora globally. And for sure, how do we have the impact of sisters and brothers on the continent? Not only the big shots, but also those who are living in Enugu state, those who are living in Port Harcourt. We got to be talking to our brothers and sisters underground. We got to break language barriers, because a lot of the reason that we're in the position we're in is intentional. The slavery, colonialism, all of that is intentional economic exploitation. And they're not going to give it up without a fight. That's one of the things that we've seen clearly with the Trump administration, because he allowed people to be free about what they really think. And they're thinking, they came to Washington last week, tore up Black Lives Matter signs at Black churches, just totally said that we as Black people are supposed to be at the bottom. There's a great book out there called Caste by Elizabeth Wilkerson. Read that book, get that book and put it close to the Bible, read that book, because at least it opens our eyes. So the strategy that Bishop, that you're putting out there, we really got to be thinking about what is the next 100 years going to look like, and how do we transform this African world? Thank you.
And one of the things, and you're absolutely right, there are several women that we invited, but because of their schedules, could not make it. And we do have other women that will share with us throughout the rest of the conference, and some young people. So, you know,
Make it a point, just make it a point.
I know, I got you, and you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And I think that too, the thing that happens with this dialogue is that it's bringing, creating new friendships. We're all now new friends. And so now that we're all friends, we can get to meet your friends and some of their friends. And so we expand our horizon and our territory for those people that we did not know before. So prior to this, we didn't know any of you, but now we're expanding our base. And so that's going to take us a long way as we begin to create that strategic plan. Dr. Ayeni?
Yes, ma'am. Dr. McFadden, I just want to piggyback on what my dear brother Melvin Ford and Bishop Latte said. The issue of the diaspora is very crucial. Last week, we just finished the first African Diaspora Symposium and Kenya Diaspora Association Coming Home Symposium, which originated in Nairobi, Kenya. I was on the planning committee. I was a speaker in 2 sessions. I moderated 2 sessions. And the next African Diaspora Symposium is going to take place in Nigeria in 2022. Now, everything that Bishop Larry and Mr. Foote talked about now was brought up in this symposium with 7 themes. And so the issue of the bridge between the diaspora and Africa, and this came upon because of the amount of remittances going to Africa from the diaspora. There are some of these countries that the remittances coming from the diaspora is almost as much as their GDP or even the expenditure of the government. So I just want to say that this is an avenue whereby whatever comes out of this meeting, you can communicate with the African Diaspora Symposium Organization, which we have its next meeting in 2022 in Nigeria.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I want to shift a little bit because part of our conversation today also had to do with health. And I love the information, Dr. Garvey, that you shared about what can take away the stress of going to natural medicines, herbs, and things like that. And so one of the questions is, what do you and others think are the contributing factors to the health disparities among Africans and African Americans worldwide? Dr. Garvey, if you would start.
Oh, I thought I mentioned those things. I mentioned that the social determinants of health were 10% environment, 20% clinical care, 40% social economic environment, and 30% behaviors. And for example, if you look at us here in the United States, I mean, we are #1 in terms of sexually transmitted diseases. Nobody is making us do that. We are #1 in killing each other. Nobody is making us do that per se. We're also becoming #1 in committing suicide. So, these are areas that we need to be able to control and deal with, but we have to do it on a community level. And certainly the church is one of the positive, community resources that we have to lean on, as well as, other NGOs. Now, when we talk about socioeconomics, well, obviously, again, if you don't have a job or if you're abused on your job, then every day is stressful. and that releases different hormones in terms of your internal environment. Your blood pressure goes up, etc. You may eat a lot of comfort food, then you become obese, and that's part of your determinant of health. Again, I mentioned a number of things in terms of what needs to be done reparations-wise and so on and so forth in terms of the new government that's coming in, Biden and Harris, in terms of policy that has to be engendered and delivered at a community level in terms of entrepreneurship, banking, access to credit, and so on, so that people can develop companies that deal with our problems in the African American community. I mean, where are our plumbers, where are our electricians, who owns the grocery store? Is it the Koreans, is it the Arabs, and so on and so forth? All of those are problems that we have to deal with within our communities, even if we have, quotes, money flooding into us from a source such as the federal government. We have to take responsibility for how we deal with our healthcare our problems. Again, because only 20% of it is going to a doctor. I've practiced medicine for a long time, and many of my patients come in and they do what they want to do, and they come in with aches, pains, and this, that, and the other thing, headaches. And it's like, okay, doc, come in, I'm here, fix me. Well, it's not my job to fix them. It's not the doctor's job to fix them. Everybody has to be responsible for their own health. So a lot of us have gotten into the disease treatment picture and not taking responsibility for our own healthcare. Now, granted, a lot of it is difficult. For example, where do you get, good food, whole food in the African American community? The 3 Arches are there, Burger King is there, all the fast food joints are there. Okay, but there is open land. Why can't you go out there and create a garden? Why can't you buy seeds and have a community garden? Why can't you get fresh vegetables out of your community garden? Why can't you link up with farmers and have a farmer's market, and so on and so forth? So we have to get off our duff and do a lot of these things for ourselves. So, I think I outlined some of it, but, just in terms of details, this is the direction in which we have to go. Personal responsibility, and echoing what, Dr. Silvana Sayeni said, it's our responsibility. Nobody's going to do it for us. Doesn't matter what the government policy is, it's still our responsibility to take care of our health, because it's our health. Nobody gives you health, it's our health. So, they can treat diseases, but we have to develop and maximize our own health.
Anyone else want to share? And I thank you. You actually answered 2 questions in one: what contributes to it and what we can do about it, that you did so poetically share in your presentation. Anyone else want to engage on that subject of health disparities and what it is that we can do? Because as you say, Dr. Garvey, it is our responsibility. Nobody's making me eat all of the comfort foods that I eat when I'm stressed out, and nobody's making me stay in the bed when it's time to get up and go exercise. And so it does become our responsibility. Unmute yourself, Mr. Foote. And say everybody can't be slim and trim like Mr. Foote, so we have to figure that out.
I run 5 miles a day. I
wow.
5 miles a day. And anyway, my point is, I was in the Bahamas recently, and I get to Bahamas whenever I can, and I noticed that the people have gotten fat. You got all the fish in the world, you got just fresh air, but the Western powers have gone to the Bahamas and told these people, don't grow your own food, don't go fish your own food. We're going to bring you Pizza Hut. We're going to, you go down to Trinidad and they're falling all over some Kentucky Fried Chicken. I'm gonna say, wait a minute, how do we allow ourselves? But so part of it being put on us in terms of systems. They want them to work in the hotels and the tourism industry and no longer grow their own food. And so now people are dying from hypertension, diabetes, not to mention COVID and some of this other stuff. But like I think when we were slaves, they didn't want us to live to be 65, 70 years old. They expected us to die at 40, 45 after our physical production start to diminish. And so there was no effort. I mean, look at what they gave us. They gave us the scraps of the meat, the fatty part of the meat. They gave us the stuff that all they wanted us to do was have enough, that give us enough energy that we could go out and work into the cotton field. But it was not based on us having a healthy life. And so some of this we inherited, grew up talking about chitlins. Oh, let's have some chitlins because, think about what you're eating, So some of it, people don't really have a choice. And then you got the pharmaceuticals who want to give us a pill to solve every problem, a pill for life. Every day, take this pill and you'll be okay. The pill costs you $5, and they do the calculation of a lifetime, paying for this pill, So part of it is actually education also. We inherited from we inherited the diet of the slave, That is where our diet is based on. It's the diet of the slave. And so how you turn that around, that gets into reparations that Dr. Garvey talked about. There's some serious stuff that we got to be pushing in terms of a quantum leap, a change in how we view a lot of these things. So I can't put it all on our people because we inherit it. You go to a lot of the areas in the Black community, you can't find a tomato within 10 miles, You can't find anything look like it's green. You got to go to the Chinese food for some food. You got to go here for some processed food. You don't even have access to it physically. You got to get on 2 buses and do this and that just to buy a tomato. So it's a really a daunting challenge that we got ahead of us.
Agreed.
Say that the issue of you lifting up access to food, fresh food for that matter, is not just here. It's happening even on the continent where we have weather like nobody else can tell it. Here in America, you have winter, you have all of these changes, whereas over there, you can go from January to December. But we've been, again, impacted. So that's why I think that, a 100-year plan, including dealing with even pregnant mothers, so that even the child in the mother's womb, we begin to educate them about this thing. I mean, it's going to take a plan. And I believe that with what we have around this table and expanding it, the health information, etc., when we put together a plan and work that plan, we can see the day when even we are gone, we'll be able to look down from heaven and see that our people are once again, as Dr. Garvey said, taking responsibility for our own health. Because that's something we've derelicted to the doctor. And then when you go, the doctor asks you, what's wrong with you? And if you don't know what's wrong with you, it's unlike the old doctors that used to check everything. Today you go, it says sneeze a little bit, let me see how it sounds. And they give you a pill for that, So I think that we need a plan, and we need to really make sure that we change the trajectory 100 years from now.
Taking a great risk, Dr. Garvey, you mentioned this a little bit in your presentation, taking a great risk and making a statement or asking the question, your thoughts on this pandemic that we find ourselves in, this coronavirus, and how it impacts the African-American community.
I can only quote the statistics, so to speak, that's out there. African Americans have been more exposed because, for one, we're very often in the front line, either as healthcare workers or in the service industries, and so that we've been exposed more than most other ethnic groups within the United States. And as we mentioned about some of the problems that we have in terms of hypertension, diabetes, stroke, etc., based on our diet, we have pre-existing conditions, including asthma and what have you. So with these pre-existing conditions, when you get new insult, so to speak, in terms of the viral infection, then you're more likely to end up either in the hospital or in the intensive care and so on and so forth. So it has impacted the African American community a great deal than the European American community and other communities here. But what it shows is the disparities in health and the social determinants that we've talked about in our presentation in terms of the whole socioeconomic situation, which, as I mentioned, is about 40% of the, and that impacts on your health. We are at the lower rung in terms of society. And we're at the lower end in terms of employment. We're at the lower end in terms of wages. We are 1/7 of the wealth of the average white community. So we have less access to these things. We have less access to good food. And certainly we're much more stressed because we have to deal with racism, naked racism on a daily basis. And it doesn't matter where you are. I see it in the hospital when I go and make rounds. I'm a doctor, but a lot of people don't think that I could be a doctor. So they look at me like I'm there to sweep the floor or what have you. And I have to raise hell because I don't take crap from anybody. But, so the average guy has a lot of that on him. So the real guy who is cleaning the floor now, he really gets it. You see, I can, how should I say, let my anger loose, but they have pent up anger because they have no recourse. And when you have all of that pent up anger, when you have all of that paranoia, I mean, it does horrible things to you, mentally, emotionally, and physically. So this is part of the stress and so on that we have as Black people. As you know, it's even dangerous to drive or to walk. Somebody sees you and they pull you over. Next thing you know, you're dead. If you talk back to the cop, you have to teach your son. I have to teach my son, look, don't get up in his face. Say, Mr. Officer, you shouldn't have to do that. But those are the conditions and those are the things that impact on your health. So it's a tremendous situation for African Americans. And of course, the pandemic has exposed it. Now the thing is solutions. And this is where we have to go in terms of what the bishop is saying, in terms of what Mel is saying. We have to find these solutions to deal with our healthcare problems, to deal with our educational problems, so that we have the right behavior. Again, I mentioned the whole business of sexually transmitted diseases. Now, that's a behavior problem. And we need to be educated properly in terms of how we express ourselves sexually. Suicides. The anger that we express to each other when you pick up a gun and when you shoot somebody over sneakers or a jacket or something like that, or simply a drive-by shooting just for excitement. These things are ridiculous in terms of human behavior. We've got to get control of that in terms of our community resources. And, again, that's kind of back on the bishop. We need those spiritual resources spread throughout our community to impact on the youth, to take them in orbit, so to speak, and teach them the way to behave, to teach them that they're really a divine expression. And you can't just simply go around and destroy divinity, because the person that you shoot or whatever is also a divine expression. And, and it's the same thing with your environment. You can't destroy your environment because it's there for your sustenance. So there's a whole lot of education, and it's not just formal education that we're talking about, but we're talking about education in terms of values and in terms of behavior.
And you're absolutely correct. And so part of that is that 100-year plan that we need to begin to create and implement. And you spoke about, which is really true, the systemic racism that really negatively impacts all of us. Whereas, you know, you can say something because of the position that you're in, but the person who's maybe cleaning the floor cannot, for fear of losing their job or experiencing some attack because of that. And so, and those are serious issues that we need to address. And hopefully, well, not hopefully, I know that this dialogue is the beginning of that. As we continue, I want to share with those on Facebook and on YouTube that you can certainly ask any question, and we'll do our best to get to you to make sure that we get to your question. And there is another question. It says, Africa's economy is poor because its natural resources are taken out of Africa to NATO nations, China and Russia. We who live in the diaspora have a special role that we can play. And that role is to learn how to refine the different raw materials from Africa and train our African sisters and brothers on how to create the added value to African raw materials. By doing this, Africa will have all the resources needed to upgrade its infrastructure and address its healthcare and environmental needs. Our HBCUs could take on this role in providing the learning institutions to educate our communities with these important skills. We should take a page from China, where they sent some of their best students to the NATO nations to learn about high tech, and now they have a silicone industry that can compete with Silicon Valley. And so again, great ideas, great suggestions that we want to put together. I agree with you, Dr. Garvey, that some of the things that we need to deal with is natural health remedies instead of just popping the pill that really has more side effects than it does have benefits in a lot of instances. So we've got a little ways to go, but we're starting the conversation, and I know that we can get it done. As we bring our panel discussion to a close, I want to give each one of you 2 or 3 minutes to just say any concluding remarks when it comes to the health and wealth disparities of Africa and African Americans as we continue this dialogue.
Do you mind, because I think this will be a good time for me to give my presentation.
Go right ahead.
All right. Many thanks to Dr. Weaver and the 400-year Celebration Incorporation for the invitation to be an interlocutor in this very important dialogue. In order to understand and successfully mitigate the health and educational disparities among Africans in the motherland, we must examine 3 questions. 1, is Africa really poor? 2, if Africa is poor, why is she poor? If Africa is not really poor, who is responsible for the existential poverty of hundreds of millions of people in the continent today? 3, what should be done to correct the healthcare and educational disparities in Africa, and who should be the driver of this correction? These questions must be addressed boldly with tough love and a sense of urgency. Question 1, is Africa really poor? Answer, absolutely not. Africa is arguably the richest continent nature has bequeathed to humanity. About 70,000 years ago, everybody on earth lived in Africa. They had everything they needed to flourish then, just as their descendants have everything they need to flourish today. These are just 4 of them. 1, enormous natural resources. 2, the continent is the least afflicted by cyclical natural disasters like earthquakes, tornadoes, snowstorms, hurricanes, and typhoons. 3, on the average, the continent has more than adequate rainfall. Sub-Saharan Africa has average rainfall of nearly 1,100 millimeters per year, more than any other region in the world. Liberia has twice that amount. By comparison, the United States, excluding Hawaii and Alaska, has average rainfall of average of about 800 millimeters per year, rain plus snow. Still, sub-Saharan Africa has the largest percentage of people in the world without access to clean water. Number 4, African nations have an abundant supply of the most important resource of nations, their people, their brains, the crown jewel of creation. Africa has 1.3 billion of them. Question 2, so who is mostly responsible for the existential poverty of hundreds of millions of people in Africa today? Answer, I respectfully submit that we Africans, and specifically the post-independent leaders of these nations. Yes, there were the centuries evil of slavery, the blatant injustice of the Berlin Conference of November 1884 to February 1885, when the continent was sliced into pieces, grabbed by the European powers, without any say by the natives and the owners of the land. Yes, there were the oppression and indignity of colonialism from 1885 to 1960s, 1957 in the case of Gold Coast, now Ghana. Nonetheless, it would be quite difficult for any active participant in the African scene in the past 50 years, or anyone like myself who grew up in colonial Africa and has been involved in development issues in the healthcare and educational sectors in sub-Saharan Africa for many years, not to conclude that the greatest obstacles to progress in Africa in the past 50 years are African leaders who have always put themselves, their immediate families and their cronies first, rather than putting their nations first. This talk is not meant to be adversarial, but we cannot deny the fact that massive corruption, greed, self-centeredness, lack of love of their citizens as themselves have been the modus operandi of most post-independent African leaders. This brings me to question 3. What should be done? What should this meeting do and the entire African diaspora to reverse the health and educational disparities among Africans in the continent? And who should be the driver of these initiatives? Well, there are 3 major pillars that are paramount. 1, mindset shift and attitudinal transformation. A shift of mindset from cannot do to can do. Our skin color may be black, but our brains are not red, blue, yellow, or black. Indeed, there is no difference in the color and the structure of the healthy brains of all the 7.8 billion people on this planet. Africans, and particularly the leaders, must know that the color of the skin has absolutely nothing to do with the quality of the output of the human brain. Whatever the brains of Chinese, Indians, Caucasians, Japanese, and other segments of the human race can accomplish, the brains of Africans can accomplish those things and even more. Second pillar, transformational leadership. The massive corruption must be extinguished. We need a new set of altruistic, selfless, loving, visionary leadership in the continent, the youths and the wise elders combined. Third pillar, honest governance that we prioritize true democratic institutions, respect for rule of law, justice, and commitment to mitigating tribal conflicts and wars. B, provide first-class infrastructure, 24/7 clean water, energy, build good roads, bridges, hospitals, clinics, and develop the agriculture sector. C, prioritize knowledge. Education is key. Africa is deluding itself if she thinks she can catch up with the rest of the world without decent basic education and secondary school education. The youths are the future of the continent. Finally, African leaders must stop selling the precious promised land, that is our promised land, and its fertile farms to outsiders, whether they are from the West, China, or India. Thank you very much, and I apologize for taking rather long. But that was the speech I prepared. which I was going to share with the panel that was sent to me.
Thank you so very much, and for those thought-provoking questions. I think a few of them we addressed during our panel discussion, and certainly they will be questions that we will be asking and answering or attempting to answer for a long time to come. And you mentioned, as others have mentioned, about the infrastructure, and we will talk about that on Saturday, an educational piece of which we will talk about on tomorrow. So I hope that you all will join us and bring your questions as well. Final thoughts and comments from the rest of the panel.
I just want to, my final comment has to do with Dr. Sylvanus. My only issue is, we think the African leaders are bad, and sure enough, we have a whole roster of them who have done horrible things. But for the most part, there are people outside of Africa who think these same guys are great, because they're doing the bidding of those. They don't have any problem with corruption. They have no problem with an African leader of your country, Nigeria, Sani Abacha, and the list goes on. Billions of dollars are siphoned off into Swiss bank accounts, and these guys are buying houses all over the place here in the United States. There are people around the world who say, fine, take 200 million, take $1 billion, but give us $1 trillion, and they accept that deal. And so don't think that the Africans or leaders are rising by themselves. They're rising with this hidden hand, who want Africa to be fragmented. They don't want Africans to do business with diaspora and build cocoa industries that, they don't want it. There's a book called The Confession of an Economic Hitman, John Perkins. Get that book, everybody ought to read that book. John Perkins, The Confessions of an Economic Hitman. And it kind of tell you what really is going on. So when you think about how bad African leaders are, don't underestimate the helping hand. And some of those are close to us. So when you start talking about straightening the issues in Africa around, when you start thinking about clearing things up, you better know there's going to be a fight. There's going to be a fight. And it's not just about what Alpha Condé is doing over in Guinea, or what Tara is doing in Cote d'Ivoire, or what, this fight is global. And so again, I think this 100-year plan makes a lot of sense, but don't underestimate what we're up against. Thank you very much. This has been a great panel. I'm really excited. I'm fired up by being part of this morning. I'm looking forward to, I'm absolutely looking forward to the follow-up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Garvey?
I think something that's important, I think Dr. Sylvanus talked about it a little bit, is the mindset. And, we have 54 different countries in Africa. Therefore, with 54 nationalists. So even though we have the African Union, and even though we're going to have the African Free Trade Area, I think, what's his name, can't get his cement to go from Nigeria to Burkina Faso in under a week. We look at Nigeria itself, and maybe it's tripartite. And we see there was a massacre of farmers up there in the north recently, I think about a week ago. And we know what happened to the girls that were abducted, etc. If we look at Ethiopia now, Tigray is causing problems, and it's pretty much a civil war going on there. The Congo is continuing with its problems. And again, a lot of these are fomented by outside agents, as Mel has intimated. And this is going to continue. So we have to educate ourselves and each other that we are one people. It's not just about Nigeria. It's about Africa. It's not just about Ghana. It's about Africa. It's not just about Ethiopia. It's about Africa. It's not just about, Melfort in DC or Julius Garvey in New York City. We're Africans living in America. So and this is one of the things that I don't think we have gotten our minds around. I think if you look at China, China is projecting itself as a Chinese civilization. And if you look at Africa, I think they have more than 30 Confucius institutes spreading the Chinese culture and philosophy in Africa. Now, where do we have any African institutes? We're not even educating ourselves about what it means to be truly African. Yet still, as Dr. Sylvanus has said, and I think Bishop has also said, the Garden of Eden was in Africa. And we have populated the whole world. We have the first civilizations. Now, what does it mean to be African as a civilization? We haven't solved that problem. And this is the mindset problem that is keeping us apart in terms of still some tribal structures and tribal cultures, and still 54 different states, even with the African Union. And of course, you know, this one is from Trinidad or from Jamaica, this one is from Georgia, or this one is from Chicago, etc. So the mind is still the big problem for the African person, and we need to solve that with a proper educational system. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's where too that, as I said earlier, the faith community can be very, very useful in the process, because it's imperative to love oneself. And one of the tools used by colonizers is to poison us with this idea of self-hate. As you said, Dr. Garvey, you know, killing each other, destroying one another. That's a total disregard for the fact that in each of us is the image of God. And so we need the kind of spirituality that does not promote some sort of a Eurocentric image of who God is. Because until we get to love ourselves, appreciate one another, it's going to be difficult. But I believe that if we are committed to the education process, as was pointed out, I think it was Apostle Paul who said something to the effect that be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. And so now we know the problems, because what I've heard here today, a very clear articulation of the problems. So the question now becomes, where do we go from here? And that's where I believe that this dialogue is not going to stop just by talking. There'll be action steps, because I believe that at this table, we have the people that can help us, help Africa make a difference.
Thank you all so much for sharing your views. Thank you for your contributions to this discussion, but also to the work that you do. We want to acknowledge the expertise that you bring to the table. We thank you for stirring up the pot of discussion. And we look forward to, as 400 Years organization, to partnering with you. There's no sense in reinventing the wheel. If we're already doing it, then, you know, let's partner with each other to make sure that we get the work done. And I believe that when we come together, we are going to be able to get the work done. Thank you again so much to our panel discussion, to Dr. Ayeni, to Mr. Melvin Foote, to Dr. Julius Garvey, and of course to our very own Bishop Seth Olarte. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We look forward to interacting with you all through the rest of the conference this week.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You are welcome. We're going to move quickly into our respondents. These are going to be the persons who respond to what has been said this morning. We have Dr. Carlos W. Perkins, who is a native of Jamaica, West Indies. He's the anointed visionary leader whom God has sent to lead Bethel Cathedral African Methodist Episcopal Church, Indianapolis, to the next level of success and achievement. Bethel Cathedral has made great strides in spirituality, education, administration, technology, and ministry expansion through its bold and principled leadership. Dr. Perkins readily admits that he is an humble servant whom God has blessed tremendously. God blessed him with a fantastic combination of diverse life experiences, which prepared him for his divine appointment at Bethel Cathedral, Indianapolis. Dr. Perkins also serves as the principal of Pike Preparatory Academy in the Metropolitan School District of Pike Township. Also, we are welcoming who will speak and respond after is Reverend Farad Masael, who is the pastor of Galbraith Zion Church in Washington, D.C., and so we look forward to it. He is a great historian, great lover of the language, Hebrew and Greek languages, and the metaphysical. He brings all of that together to give us an understanding of who we are as a people and where we need to go. So we look forward to hearing from both Dr. Carlos Perkins and Reverend Farad Masael. You both have about 10 minutes to respond, and we'll begin with Dr. Perkins.
Well, good afternoon. And I appreciate this opportunity to share. Okay, my computer is doing a whole bunch of stuff here.
But you're good.
Okay, I'm good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share, Dr. McFadden, and for the panelists that's on. That was a rich discussion and a rich presentation. There is so much that I want to share. There's so much that I want to respond to. As I anchor in Dr. McFadden, my experience is in education, both as a seasoned educator, but also as a faith leader, pastor over the last 20 years. And so let me say thank you to Dr. Julius Garvey, to Mr. Mel Foote. Mr. Foote, we have been on a number of different occasions, different panels together with the leadership of Dr. Jonathan Weaver, to Dr. Ayeni for that challenge around looking at what are some of the things that are happening on the continent of Africa and our responsibilities, and then to Bishop Larthy for that really challenging word this morning as we started the discussion. I come to this with a very unique experience. As you shared, Dr. McFadden, I was educated in Jamaica, studied in the United States, both with my undergraduate and graduate work. I served as an educational leader in the Caribbean, founded an elementary school in Haiti, also 2 charter schools in Washington, D.C. and Baltimore City, and studied in West Africa, in Ghana and Burkina Faso. And so I come to this discussion really through the lens of education, but also our responsibility for connectivity and our responsibility as African living across the diaspora. So let me say thank you to my father in the ministry, Reverend Jonathan Weaver, for this opportunity, for calling one of his sons to be here this morning. Thank you to Bishop Larthy for challenging us to think about our personhood as Africans living across the diaspora and our moral responsibility to see Africa as home. The challenge posed by this conference is for us to deepen our understanding of the health and education disparities among Africans worldwide and the need for greater connection. Our connections go beyond our birthright in Africa and our collective experience of racism, of classism, of wealth disparities, and systemic oppression. Educational disparities support systems intended to ensure colonialism and white supremacy. One of the most glaring evidence of systematic racism and oppression is the educational disparities experienced by Africans across the diaspora. Millions of Black parents expect public schools to help their children to be better. Millions of Black students depend on public education to pursue their happiness. Yet data demonstrate that access to education for Black students is limited. Thus, our collective efforts to change the condition of education for Black students need a steadfast commitment of every policymaker, every school leader, every educator. Better education for students is pivotal. The recent released congressional mandate annual report titled The Condition of Education 2020, which was prepared by the National Center for Educational Statistics, painted a very unsettling national picture of Black students' state of education. This is not only in the United States, but across the diaspora. We still find that the poverty rate is still the highest for Black students. In 2018, nearly 1/3 of Black students live in poverty, compared with 10% of white students and families living below the poverty line. The percentage of Black students who live in households where the highest level of education attained by either parent was a bachelor's degree or a higher degree was 27%, compared with 69% of white and Asian American students and families. Our responsibility, our collective responsibility, as we have been sharing this morning, is not only to look at the reality of where we are, but to charge those who are responsible ourselves to be the ones to make the difference. Let me point out another statistics that's our reality. As an educator in this 21st century experience of going through COVID-19, we have seen a drastic shift to online virtual learning. Matter of fact, I'm closing out the semester today, and my students have all been virtually learning over the past 3 weeks. Yet the lack of internet access at home has become a barrier for Black and Brown students across the diaspora. What we heard this morning from our panelists, what we listened to was intentionality of those that are in power to ensure that these disparities continue and that our Black and Brown students are not empowered to be able to do what they are designed and created to do. In 2018, 90% of Black students have home internet access. However, watch this, that percentage is much lower than their white and Asian colleagues. What we found was that 11% had home internet access only through a smartphone, compared with only 2% among Asian and white students. In other words, majority of the Black students living across the diaspora, they do have access to the internet, but that's through their smartphone. That is rather limiting as to what they can do to engage in the education process. So even over the last 12 months, in the midst of this pandemic, we have seen the disparities increase between Black and Brown students and their counterpart. Let me push a little bit more just in terms of some of the statistics I share with you, that my lens is through education. That's where I spend most of my time. That's where I have worked in communities to ensure that Black and Brown students get the access and the resources and the education that they need to be able to succeed in life. What we've discovered that majority of our Black students attend high poverty schools. Watch this, in fall of 2017, over 51 million students enrolled in public elementary and secondary schools, and 7.7 million were Black. Only 7% of Black students attended low poverty schools, compared to 39% Asian and 31% white. Majority of our Black and Brown students are in high poverty schools. Not only are they in high poverty schools, but Black students are more likely to be diagnosed with disabilities and receive services for emotional disturbance. And I thank Dr. Harvey for sharing his expertise around health disparities and the connection that we see in the education realm around health and mental emotional disabilities. That many of our students are entering into schools where they're not having a healthy meal at home, where they're not given the necessary nutrients to be successful, to perform. And so research shows that Black students are disproportionately represented in educational programs around emotional disturbance. Let me push a little bit more. The disproportion between Black students and Black teachers have not improved. What we have seen is an increase in the achievement gap. Again, connecting directly to the health issues, connecting directly to colonialism, connecting directly to what I stated before about the disparities in education support a greater need of the community, a greater need of the society, a greater need to ensure that Black and brown students do not get what they need. Let me anchor in on this, Dr. McFadden, as we pivot to our next respondent, that the educational disparities that we see, that they support systems that intend to ensure colonialism and white supremacy. We have much work to do, but that work, as Dr. Ayeni has shared, starts with us. That work, our students are dependent on us across the diaspora to be able to provide the support and the resources that they need to succeed. Again, thank you for this opportunity to be a part of this great discussion, to be a part of this celebration. And I look forward over the next 2 days to learn so much more.
Thank you so much, and just be assured that we consider you as a partner as well. We could have dialogued about that whole presentation that you made, and we will at another time. Reverend Farad Masael.
Thank you very much, Dr. McFadden, and to Bishop Seth Olate, and to all of the fantastic presenters. I shall be very brief. I don't know exactly how to respond to such profound truth hitting me all at one time from so many different perspectives. However, my soul is on fire. Therefore, it bears witness to the fact that all is well. I'm a preacher. I don't apologize. I thank the divine creator of all that is for calling me into his ministry, and I thank him for preserving me up to this point. I just simply want to make a couple of comments. Number one, I want to thank God for this prophet that is among us. And I don't take the word lightly. This Nabi, this real Roe, this real seer, this bishop who is Bishop Latte, for this moment. I've talked with him on Livingstone College's campus when we were both young men. I've watched him over the years. He has not only been profound, he has not only been a visionary, but he has been consistent. Now, what shall we do? Where shall we go from the 400-year mark? Well, we're there. This is the beginning. This is, if it's not the beginning, it's a great step in the beginning. We're actually doing now. So for him, not only to have followed his mind and the Spirit of God, but to have brought it to this point, to this conference, is mind-boggling. So I do give God the highest praise for him and for that. I think what we might need, and I was concentrating on the first 3 points on the flyer, dual citizenship, the need to connect intellectually, and of course, education. And we've heard that. We've heard all three beautifully. But I'm an African American, so-called. And there's a little bit of a difference, even when you begin to talk about dual citizenship, because there are some undiscussed concerns concerning citizenship for those persons who I refer to as African Americans. I won't go into it, but you should just be able to see, based on the things that have been said today, how the disparities exist, how things can happen to one group and then can never happen to another group. Sooner or later, we're going to have to sit down and say, you know what? Maybe what is taking place is legal. Maybe what is taking place is right, according to some people. And we're fighting and we're kicking. But it seems to me that in that this continues to take place and people continue to be set free from their evil and wicked behavior, then maybe this is a part of an unwritten law, so to speak, so as to determine how things will be. Excuse me. So that has to do with, in my opinion, citizenship. I won't go into my own citizenship status, but I do know that a lot of people think that they are a part of the citizenry in the United States, but perhaps may not be. And when you revisit the three amendments, 13th, 14th, and 15th, it'll give us a clearer picture as to how you can so easily not be a citizen of the United States based on the interpretation of those three amendments. I won't go into it, but I really thank the bishop for this conference, blood crying out, blood crying out. I found that in Genesis. Certainly it's a part of your theme, the name of the movement. But when the divine creator, Yahuwah, God, came to Cain, said, where's your brother? He said, well, am I my brother's keeper? He said, I heard his blood crying out from the ground. What did he mean? Can blood talk? Perhaps he meant his bloodline, the bloodline of all of those who would not get an opportunity to come into this realm. If God heard the bloodline of one soul, all those unborn, what about the bloodline of the millions? I believe it was Du Bois numbers who numbered it up above 90 million souls that perished in the Middle Passage just coming from Africa to America. Even though we know that there's another story about that as well. What about them? I'm sure all of those unborn souls, children that never came into existence were heard crying out to the same divine creator. Why do I make this point? Because Bishop Latte has brought my attention to the fact that the sun, of course, the moon has a profound effect on people. He was teaching about the lunatic. Obviously, the sun has a profound effect on people because everything seems to live better under sunlight. Perhaps other bodies may have effect on human beings. And maybe the behavior of human beings may have an effect on nature. Maybe the storms, the viruses. I know this may not sound of such according to some scientists, but if you take it to quantum physics, I think that I can have an argument that perhaps there is a connection between behavioral patterns and nature itself. Wickedness can create backlashes through nature. I think that what we basically need as Africans is to determine who we are. What is it to be an African? Because I was born in Africa, does that make me an African? I think maybe not. I think Africa has to be born in us. It has to be born in us. And therefore, there's a dire need for a new cosmogony, an entirely new cosmogony upon which to establish our educational system so as to teach ourselves how to come back to know ourselves, that we can love ourselves, not hate others, but that love ourselves, and therefore begin to build whatever we build for ourselves. It has been said that some African leaders, when they become in power, they set up good things for themselves and their families and buying houses. It's part of the way it is. I think though, once we have Africa born in us, perhaps we will still do the same. But we would want for every single African the same as we want for ourselves. I've been hearing people refer to China and the Chinese. Yes, but there's one China. And the China people, the Chinese, love the Chinese. And the Chinese love China. So it has to be an element of what I call love, which makes you say to yourself that the cause of my people is greater than the cause of my own life. And I think that a great cosmogony based on our own religion will bring us back to that reality. In my conclusion, we might want to reconsider a little community in Dimona, Israel. I know Black Hebrew Israelites, I know a cult, I know so many things that have been said about them. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about this is a group of what we call African Americans who left the United States on their own power and went to Israel and established a kingdom there. And according to Rabbi Israel J. Gerber, who was writing his book, Heritage Seekers, when they were making that move, and I was his student at Hood Theological Seminary at the time. According to his book, he said that's the only group that ever left America without any help from any government. Now, whether that's true or not, it's in his book. I visited them, and I visit them every year. You will see that they have mastered the health question because they rarely get sick. They were denied medical treatment upon their arrival. So they had to learn how, first of all, not to get sick. Secondly, how to heal themselves once they did. That began their educational process. That began the way that they would educate themselves for their own survival. Long story, short story. And the reason why I use them is because they are African Americans. We are all African, particularly those with whom Africa has been born. But I'm saying specifically, they're from the Midwest of the United States, many of them. They're from all over now, but many of them. And they have shown that it can be done. Heard from just a couple of weeks ago, just last week, not one coronavirus. So I would suggest, just as a part of the 100-year plan, that perhaps maybe a representation from the various groups will go and just visit just to see the paradigm, not go to become anything but to see the paradigm. When they went there, as I finished, they had, they first went there, Israel had no vegan consciousness whatsoever. Now it has become 13% vegan. And they do give credit to this little community. So all I'm saying is we don't have to plan to do, we're already doing. And according to God's timeline, we're doing it at the right time because you're witnessing the resurrection of Africa. And the resurrection of Africa is the resurrection of us because Africa has been born in us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to my pastor, to Reverend Farad Masael, for sharing your insights. Thank you again to Dr. Perry, both of you. We could have been on this